I launched an accusation saying, okay, a lot of companies aren't adopting innovation. Why is that? Is it different markets? Is it they will come along later? Is it the wealth of the consumer doesn't necessarily necessitate the latest technologies? I think now we have a chance to dive in really deeply to this subject. So by way of introduction, and I'll let them introduce themselves as well, but Vivek, his role on this particular discussion is going to be as kind of a subject matter expert, so not specifically talking Marvell, but talking generally about emerging markets, because he has a lot of experience doing business development for telecom in those spaces. And of course, Colin will be focused on Ooredoo in the markets where Ooredoo operates. So I guess I'd like to ask you guys if you'd like to self-introduce, and I think Ooredoo has a couple of slides as well, so maybe we can kick it off with you, Colin, look at your slides, and then we'll go over to Vivek after.
Sure, Derek.
Sure.
All right, so first of all, I would like to just quickly reintroduce Ooredoo for those of you that were not in the earlier session. A quick word about Ooredoo. Ooredoo currently is the telecom group focusing on the emerging markets. We are covering 16 countries and currently with 114 million customers. Primarily the markets that we focus on is Middle East, North Africa, and Southeast Asia. Some of the countries, for example, just to give you some ideas, we are operating in the Gulf country, which is Qatar, where I'm based, Oman, Kuwait, Iraq, Tunisia, Algeria in North Africa, Indonesia, and Myanmar in also Southeast Asia. Now, for the Ooredoo Group, our vision is really to attract customers and be able to serve them. And we started to go into the digital space as well. So last year, we have also formed a strategic ventures together with Rocket Internet to cover the entire Asia, also for digital innovation, for also covering the internet. Now we're going to come across discussing some of the challenge and opportunity later on. So what I would like to do quickly is just to give you an idea of what are some of the digital innovations other than the core network side that we are just like our industry peer, looking at customer services, customer experience, and getting people to use data services. Other than that, I would very much like to bring your attention to 6 areas that we would like to very much work with partners across the globe. The first one, being in the digital and TV and entertainment areas, is something that we have started looking into building in the emerging markets. Speaking with Vivek, we were also saying that in the emerging markets, there's lots of opportunity for people to be entertained, actually. And that's where a lot of revenue potential would be, for sure. So we can talk about that later on.
Yeah.
The second area is on the API and ecosystem partnership. And that is because, in the emerging markets, smartphone penetration is building up. And, what's lacking is really a good localized content and localized way of providing, applications. I'm sure that a lot of the great apps can be global, but a lot of the local opportunity and gap are not being fulfilled and with content yet. So I think that's another area that we can probably add a lot of value together. And Ooredoo, what we're doing is actually we're trying to set up some startup incubation also in a few countries, which we can also talk about later on. And that's where a lot of the APIs, and Derek earlier on, we talked about the Mobile Connect being one of the APIs that we would be putting into that in terms of working with developers. And we can touch upon that later on. The third area is mobile advertising. Unlike US, that's where the most advanced market, we believe, is currently in. We see a lot of opportunity for mobile advertising and, with the analytics that we know about the customers, and we are very much open to work on that particular opportunities together with potential partners. The fourth area, interestingly, is also because, where I'm based. Qatar has won the World Cup to host it in 2022. There's a lot of controversies and debate, and I'm not here for that. I'm more here to speak about, if it does happen, and our country right now is going through a lot of infrastructure building, plus, more importantly, catering for this mega events that is upcoming. So if you and your company or the startups in the Valley has any ideas about mega events or great ideas of providing during or post events type of services, Qatar would be a great country in order to do that. And the vision of Qatar is to be influential also for the region, not just for the Qatar, because the World Cup at the end of the day is a global event. So that's another area that we would very much, and we're working very closely with the government to drive that, being Ooredoo. Fifth area, I don't want to repeat it anymore, but mobile identity is something that we're supporting the industry-wide initiative. So this is something that we're trying to work with across the board. Now, the numbering is wrong, but at the end of the day, the number 6 thing is Internet of Things. Now, we are still in a pretty much onset of the stage of looking at the IoT. So we're pretty much open to talk to anyone and discuss with you in terms of how we can make it work. Because right now, this is an area that is really important for a few of our countries. And Vivek was talking about smart city when we were chatting. And smart city is something that, because of the mega events that are upcoming, is Indonesia is important. For Qatar is also important. For Kuwait is an important topic. But that's just one thing. Smart home is another thing that we're looking at. And of course, our B2B team is also looking into working with the connected cars across the board to support that initiative. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're looking at.
Great. A couple of quick questions on that. Maybe for both of you. Over and over, we see the big sporting events, Olympics, World Cup, Sochi is driving the adoption of technology. I see spectrum auctions being aligned with these kind of games. What do you think is the reason, and why are the games the things that are kind of defining the technology development? And it seems to happen over and over.
Yeah, if I can just take that, take that first. First of all, I think it's the perfect thing to give a time horizon and a common goal for everyone to look at. And secondly, because, well, the government and everybody is throwing some money into it. And so there's some incentive for people to really look at it. But I think when I'm speaking that together with the Supreme Committee who is driving behind the entire event, they don't want to just look at the event itself because that's just short-lived. Really what they want to use is this opportunity to drive a much bigger ecosystem and longer-term vision. And again, because of the region that is so tight in the Middle East.
Because it seems to me like it's a great opportunity for a business, and this is, I'm not speaking for you, but it's a great opportunity for a business to go, we had some regulatory resistance to this thing we wanted to do, or there were some opposing viewpoints, but everybody gets behind the World Cup. So it's a great time to say, well, would you like that for the World Cup? And bang, you get a lot of political people aligned around it, seems to as well.
And I think if you look at all the 6 areas with the Colin talked about, they all aligned together at that time, like from an ecosystem perspective.
Probably,
just a few thoughts on emerging markets. I think if you look at the power of emerging markets, is like over half of the population of Earth, actually, of our planet is in emerging markets, right? And the things have changed in the last, I would say, probably 10 years significantly, where the middle class has taken a lot more a part of the emerging markets where they have a disposable income to spend for expenditure perspective. So I've dealt a lot with India, Indonesia, for example, and Southeast Asia. And one of the key things which comes out is that everybody wants everything. At a very low cost. That's the fundamental part of it.
We make a mistake thinking that, the poor people will not want the Apple phone, they will want it. But the reality, and we see the same thing with youth in this country. A 10-year-old would like a specific, no, they want the top of the line experience, right?
Correct. So if you look at on the digital TV and entertainment space, I mean, ARPU I won't say every emerging market country is the same ARPU, but I think it hovers from probably $3 to $7 or $10. That's the ARPU per subscriber, basically, if you look at. But the volume is also very big. So people make money on the volume and so on and so forth. If you look at in terms of sports events, now we talked about soccer, for example, right? India has cricket. And every time there is a cricket match between India and Pakistan happens, everybody's like glued to the TV all the time. So, and that's where the more mobile advertising and the digital advertising takes place. But the more important part I would like to say, what we assume here very clearly is a broadband connection in emerging markets is 500 kilobit per second, 1 megabit per second. You know, that's a broadband connectivity we are talking about. So a lot of servers of the content, which is not resident inside the emerging markets, takes a long time for deployment. So for Facebook and they have to deploy these things for mobile devices. Second piece is it's all about mobile first.
Yep.
You know, it's nothing, there is no PC revolution.
Is it mobile only is kind of the approach, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the people are using tablets and PCs and so on and so forth, but it's mobile first.
Yep.
Second thing what I've seen is that we are looking at on the LTE kind of handsets, we'll start seeing handsets coming out maybe around $70 in the market in smartphones, right?
Yeah.
And that ecosystem will actually drive the pressure on the developed markets in terms of to bring the cost down as well. So that's second piece. The third piece I think is that since the volume is very big, the operators are not looking to subsidize the handsets because the things are not finite for in terms of even the equipment, the CPU equipment. For example, in the US, for example, you will be able to take a set-top box or a CPU equipment or a handset and they subsidize to the customer or a consumer. But in those markets, not happening because of the attrition rate.
Yep.
It's open markets. For example, India is 12 operators in mobile, and probably 8 operators in landline.
Yep.
If you look at Indonesia, 13 operators, right? And they're all vying for a small spectrum and small bits of data which is coming through. And just a last thought on this whole thing is, to me, at least what I've seen is emerging markets across the board. I've been to Philippines, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, you name it, more or less, right? And I see it's a very, very style conscious. People want to change their devices every 9-10 months.
Wow.
On their own dime. You know, it's not like, okay, I got a subsidy, okay, it's a free handset come from XYZ operator. But it's all, that's one thing. The second thing is that ARPU, as I mentioned earlier on the digital landscape, is becoming very low. So with certain operators, I won't name it right now, it's maybe not public, that I don't think you guys are also looking into that, like EMBMS technology is becoming more deploying in there. But I would also ask Colin one question to you. You're going after 2022. By that time, I think 5G will be ready. Any plans to do 5G in there?
We're expecting 6G to be ready by then. But
perfect.
Marvell to develop it,
so
please.
we'll all be looking at the soccer game virtual reality. I think you know, the other point which I like to just add on to what Vivek was saying. You know, one thing about the emerging markets, by the way, the Ooredoo Group footprint, although we're focusing on the emerging markets, there are some unique characteristics on a couple of you know, different batches. Like for instance, you know, in the GCC countries, which is the Gulf countries, you know, the ARPU is high and people are, they tend to have more than one smartphones and high-ends. And we have also countries which is like Myanmar, where we're just providing, you know, the first batch of 3G services there. For Indonesia, it's a huge market. It's very complex. It's very competitive. But you know, the demand of services are very much, you know, they're just looking and they're hungry for good content, by the way. That's one unique characteristic that the emerging market has. In US, there, you know, in advanced markets such as here, there are so much of good, you know, sort of good services and content, but there's such a gap in emerging markets, and there's ample of opportunities for companies to work together, and not just for localized.
Primarily, as this question, primarily localized entertainment content in the right language as well, right?
Yes and no, but because, you know, it's just because a lot of time when we talk about, you know, good content for the country, it shouldn't be just a language translation. It should be much more adaptive to what the local needs and the flavor.
More homologation, basically.
Exactly, exactly. So that's there's a big gap in you know, particularly in that.
So Vivek brings up the concept of style. It seems like, it seems surprising, like, oh, why would they care so much about style if it costs them such a large proportion of their monthly income? But I think the same way that, you know, when we look at an automobile, if you don't have an automobile, how are you expressing your wealth or your style or your status? Is that one of the reasons you think it falls down to the phone? Is kind of the...
It's not just phone. I think it's all about you buy a TV, you buy amenities, whatever you're looking at. That's what people typically drive towards. And since the refresh rate of replacement is very high because of the low cost part of it, people just having high for my earlier part, what I said is the middle class income disposable was becoming more and more higher.
Right.
They would like to replace the devices. And that actually puts a lot of challenge on the operators. When you have 13 operators or target for the same subscriber, they have to go and say, okay, next day the subscriber switches to the operator. That's one. I think one part of the concept which I would like to bring it in, and you touched upon that, Colin, is that the big opportunities, I think, in the Internet of Things. I think emerging markets, and I won't say every emerging market is again the same. Qatar, I think, is much more, for example, emerged, I would say, right? But if you look at Indonesia and other places, there's a huge opportunity in building Internet of Things target markets, right?
Really?
The reason being, there is no proper logistics. There is no workflow to create all the services around it.
Yeah.
And all those things are missing. Now, Internet of Things, I'm going to digress a little bit from that perspective, but Internet of Things today is you buy irrigation controller, for example, is at $200.
Yeah.
Should not be, you know. It should be less than $20, right?
Yeah.
So there's no reason to do that. So I think emerging markets deployments will actually bring in that kind of cost driver to drive those kind of things.
Interesting. I'd be curious because I mean the consumer electronics count. I know every time I go to CES, they say, hey, the average American home has 31 consumer electronic devices in it, and I bet all of us go, is that it? Like, because I got about 250 in my living room. But then you jump to, that's the US, so around the 30s. You jump to the developing world, and the amount of consumer electronic devices currently is far, far lower. So IoT would, any smart home would imply a big bump in connected electronic devices in those homes.
An important part is connected. So like I talked about that, it's also driven by the penetration of broadband, right? If the broadband is not there, it's not be connected as well.
Colin, are you seeing that particular market exploding in your wealthier, like Qatar and things like that? Or are you seeing that all across your networks?
Well, I think the Internet of Things certainly is at a very early stage right now. However, as you said, Derek, in Qatar, certainly, because there are massive infrastructure building right now. So, security, building services, and things like that with a central hub. I mean, it's a new concept. The thing is, it's missing, as you mentioned, but it's also a very much opportunity because there's no baggage. There's no system to switch.
Right. Yeah.
It's new. It's something that you're just putting in new.
It's a leapfrog situation.
Exactly.
Just jump ahead.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask you, because I know you have a slide too, and I'm going to ask you the question that'll cue in your slide too, so heads up to the AV guys. We talked about how, earlier on, I think Dr. Taga talked about how great, it's okay for AT&T is here, Verizon is here, France Telecom, Docomo, like Orange, all these big global players that have budget, that are the leading, large size in developed countries, are here capturing innovation, find themselves at the head of that race. You guys are here, and you're serving different kinds of markets, although not just Myanmar, also Qatar and some interesting places. But what are the methods, like how do people engage with you, and what's different about engaging with Ooredoo as an innovation partner for Silicon Valley or other entrepreneurs? And what are the methods for doing that? So with that, we could roll into your slide too.
Thanks for that question, actually. We are really trying to, the benefit of being an emerging market is we can always learn from our peers. and to be very honest, we're really just trying to build that process right now. And we're opening up in terms of working with third parties and working with all the business partners. So one thing that on our last slide is that we're trying to build up, sort of APIs in order to work with people. The good thing is we have, we're just on the journey of doing that so that we don't have a lot of baggage. But we are also trying to learn and build that process right now. Now, the best way to engage with us is to talk to us because, the benefit of Ooredoo Group is we're still relatively small. But our customer number is growing, fortunately. So we do have a very good, piece of opportunity to work together with our partners. We try to, our vision is to be really, truly open in terms of working with people. Thanks to a lot of the OTT competitions that help us to see that we should embrace and collaborate rather than just thinking that we're always competing. So here's lots of things that we can do together.
So there are carriers that are multinationals that you think, oh, if I make a deal with this particular carrier, I'll immediately be in their other 27 national markets. And it doesn't pan out. Each one operates very independently. And there's other ones where it is more homogeneous. It is one that moves, they never move completely together as a unit, but more so. So would you consider Ooredoo to be a company that is driven by a head and the affiliates kind of follow along, or more completely independent under one umbrella.
Right. I guess if I'm getting your question correctly, is whether we have a centralized approach where we determine everything, or when a partner works with us, does that mean they can work with multiple countries? We are pretty much in the sort of a hybrid mode. So I do not want to say that, you just come talk to me and then, basically 16 countries will be working with you.
Right.
However, we do have a very influential way and collaborative way of working with our opcos, operating countries. And the way that we work is to embrace the, where value can be created. We believe then our operators will like to work with us. And we do have a group framework of working with people. So we're trying to enhance that. But as a telco, it's still not the easiest as of the moment. However, what I want to assure you is something that we're open to working with people.
And by the way, I've never seen any telco or any other multinational for that matter. I mean, Oreo cookies, I'm Canadian. If you bite into an Oreo cookie in Canada, it tastes different. The cookie crust is more crumbly. So there's a different formulation that somehow appealed to Canadian. So, even if you're making Oreo cookies, you make it different for each nation. You can't just say this is the formula. Yes. So in the telco world, with the difference in regulations and markets and you can't possibly have one solution fits all. You have to be respectful of your local CEOs and what they would. But on the other hand, wherever there's cost efficiencies and shared synergies, you want to be sure to deploy those, right?
Yes.
So Vivek, working towards wrapping up. How do you see? You talk a lot about how the customer in these developing nations want the same things that the customer in our countries want. Will there be an element of catch up, or will they always be kind of trailing us? Years behind. Will the gap be shortened or not?
Well, I think it's not a question of whether there's a gap to be shortened. I think let's talk about the devices part of it to start with. I think emerging markets typically is made up of, I would say largely 3 tiers. One is the top tier, afford anything. Top, whatever they want, they can afford it. It's a pretty big chunk. Even India, I would say probably 20 million people, right? 20, 30 million people. And you combine the emerging markets together, probably comes down to be 100, 150 million people. So that's one thing. Then it's a middle class, which is cumulatively probably 1.2, 1.3 billion people across the world. And then there is a whole next level of strata where they are looking at very, very cost-effective, ultra-cost-effective, low-margin kind of a business. So most of the companies, at least what I've seen, is they basically try to make up the money in the top first and second tier of the market. That's one. The second piece, I think, what need to be cognizant of is that this is a transition which is going on over there too. I mean, LTE, as an example, is just starting to happen. If you look at, I would say, Indonesia and India cumulatively, probably will have 15 million total subscribers on LTE today, even less than that, right? Capable devices. And cumulatively together, they're 1 billion altogether. So this whole growth has to go behind that.
Do you think, so you mentioned that in general people are addressing the more wealthy market in the developing world. Is that a mistake, or is that the right thing for us to address from these wealthy companies?
No, I think, look, from a business perspective, you need to make margin, you have to make money, right? You can't just basically go and say, I'm going to go after the people, those who don't have money, and just go and, this is not like a non-profit organization going on, right?
But the Indian carriers make profits off with $12 ARPUs, right? So I mean,
yes and no. Not every Indian, I would say, not every Indian carrier would be making that, but I don't know for a fact. But the important part of this whole equation, what is happening is that people are bringing devices. They are able to afford devices. And now the devices are moving from, for example, feature phones to smartphones very quickly, but also at home as well. The CRT TVs are being now replaced with the LCD or LED TVs, for example, right? So the content, HD content and all those things will start coming together. I'll give you one example. The HD set-top box in India and Indonesia, at least recently we have been looking into some bids, is less than $25, right? And even the question is, can we do it for $10, right? In the US, the same thing would be, I won't say same thing, but for US market would be at least $150.
Right.
So it's a totally different ball game altogether. But the good part is, and maybe Colin, you can comment on this, the whole business model for the carriers in emerging markets is very different. They are not subsidizing anything. They're not buying any devices. They're not buying anything.
Right.
Most of their OPEX is driven by services and maintenance and customer acquisition and retention. right?
I actually think that is a very important point, and maybe I should mention as well. Thanks for that. Largely of most of the emerging markets, we have prepaid customers rather than postpaid. So there's no subsidy on the handset. Right. Plus another point which I like to raise, and that's why we were going after the mobile money as well, because people generally do not use credit card, and even though if they have, plus the penetration of credit card is very low in our markets.
Less than 4%, I guess.
Exactly. That's another reason why we should be a good partner for anyone who wanted to make money and real money transactions.
That ties into your identity speech, so identity, payment solutions.
And payment solution, using carrier billing, for instance, as a simple thing, but it's something important.
So and to wrap this all up, because we're out of time, but you guys both brought up entertainment is critical. So you have people who have one device, mobile first, to Vivek's point. They have this tablet or phone, probably a phone, and they're going to consume entertainment on it in a prepaid manner in some senses. They're going to have some stored value and say, I'm going to buy a film or I'm going to buy a TV show, and you guys are going to be able to broker the content, host it, cloud services, and address the, so even with a consumer who's doesn't have a lot of disposable income, you're going to be able to capture a big portion of their spend on a per month basis, giving them services they truly want.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but I think, Colin, you may probably comment on this. I don't think so there is a segmented video on demand services kind of a concept too much in emerging markets. It's more like bundled, here's my bundle of 300 channels for $5,
Wow.
That's what it is.
Yep.
Yeah, but adding on to Derek's point though, we do have a different segments of people.
Correct.
Although they may not be the high-end usage of broadband, etc., but we do have sort of lower bandwidth type of digital or rich media content also for these type of customer, which they can use as well.
Yeah, and the funny thing, really, if people have a certain monthly budget in all of their consumer spending, what you're really going after is saying, can I displace some lottery tickets? Can I displace some sports, tickets you bought to go to the soccer game, and have you instead watch the World Cricket Championship or anything to move
exactly.
more? Okay.
And just to remind you, right, there is not as many entertainment choices and options as here in the advanced market.
Right.
So the mobile becomes the primarily entertainment tools for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would like to say, I know you want to wrap it up, but one last thing. There are only two applications which I think everybody has it. One is WhatsApp and WeChat in emerging markets.
Yep.
That's the point of communication, group communication, that's what they do. And maybe Facebook is the third one.
And maybe Facebook.
No, I won't say. I would say maybe Facebook is the third one.
God knows they're being aggressive in this space as well, right, with internet dollar. Okay, well, thank you very much, Colin, Vivek. A great discussion, and hopefully you guys can continue with some of the people who want to follow up after.
Thanks a lot.